In today's video, we have a variety of NHL news topics to discuss, including some more follow-up on the Mike Babcock firing situation yesterday with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Dustin Byfuglien has officially filed a grievance against the Winnipeg Jets, and could we see a big trade between the Calgary Flames and the Philadelphia Flyers? We'll discuss that possibility coming up next. So welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of news updates to jump into. And first of all, I just want to kick things off with a couple of quick updates. The other day, we had discussed the fact that Troy Brouwer was with the St. Louis Blues on a professional tryout along with Jamie McGinn. McGinn was later released, but Brouwer has been signed to a one-year deal at $725,000 for the remainder of the current season. So the St. Louis Blues add themselves another veteran forward in Brouwer, who's certainly familiar with the club where he played there for a season before. They seem to be very impressed with how good a shape he was in, and certainly were willing to add another veteran to their lineup after more injuries. Of course, not only Tarasenko longer term, but they did announce as well that Sammy Blais is going to be out for an extended period of time too. So the Blues are feeling the injuries, and they were able to dip into the free agent market to add themselves an experienced veteran to hopefully help propel them to another playoff run. The Columbus Blue Jackets have made an addition to their coaching staff, adding former Jack Adams winner Paul MacLean to their staff as an assistant coach, specifically to help with the power play. Now, as you may or may not recall, Paul MacLean got into coaching originally as an assistant with Mike Babcock. He was an assistant to him for a number of years before getting an opportunity to be the head coach of the Ottawa Senators. Early in his career there, he won the Jack Adams Trophy for top coach. Of course, he was later dismissed and has been an assistant coach on a couple of other stomps before recently being unemployed out of the NHL for the last little while. So he rejoins the NHL as an assistant here with Columbus, hoping to improve their power play. So we'll see how that works out. I mean, Paul MacLean was a pretty offensive hockey player back in his own day, and certainly did have some success running special teams in the past. So we'll see how he does here with Columbus, if he can help them get their power play clicking at a higher rate. Now, as I mentioned as well, Winnipeg Jets defenseman Dustin Byfuglien and his agents have officially filed a grievance against the Winnipeg Jets for the suspension, of course, since he's been suspended, which means he's not getting paid. This whole really odd scenario unfolded as training camps were ready to begin. Dustin Byfuglien showed up and decided he was not reporting to camp and requested a leave of absence from Winnipeg, and there was a lot of talk that he was pondering his future, wasn't sure if he wanted to retire, if he was going to continue playing or not. Then it was revealed that he was still dealing with some ankle issues, an injury that he dealt with the season prior. Obviously, there were some conflicting forms of opinion between the Jets medical staff and Byfuglien and perhaps any other medical people he sought help from. Of course, he was deemed healthy at the season-ending meetings with the Winnipeg Jets, so really it's kind of odd how he goes into camp, and being injured. Of course, they probably were kind of go with the fact that he likely re-injured it or aggravated this injury in a different form or something else off the ice throughout the summer, which of course would not necessarily be their problem per se, but hard to say what's gone down here. I mean, Dustin Byfuglien is certainly the type of player who is a big part of their team, a big part of their leadership group, a big part of their lot of success here in the last couple of years. Of course, he hasn't been playing. This team has gone through a lot of adversity early on here in the season, but so far they've fared out okay. They're still kind of hanging on to a playoff spot here right now. But of course, I think ideally they'd love to have him back, but it's really difficult to say at this point if that's ever going to happen. Byfuglien ended up going against the advice of Jets medical staff and ended up having an ankle surgery on his own, and it was deemed that he would be out for about 4 months or so likely should have him fully recovered sometime early in the new year. At that point, he could start to resume playing, but of course, is he going to want to play for Winnipeg? Is Winnipeg going to want him back? I mean, ideally, as somebody he provides, I'm sure they would, but is there going to be hurt feelings? Is there going to be, a strained relationship here that could come into effect and possibly cause Byfuglien to be traded? It's certainly a possibility. The Winnipeg Jets probably could get a pretty good return from a healthy Dustin Byfuglien, but at the same time, a lot of other teams might be reluctant to take him on, given what he's gone through this year. It's really hard to say. He still has more time left on his contract as well beyond the current season too, so I'm not really sure exactly how this is all going to play out. Clearly, whether or not he's suspended versus not would actually determine whether or not he's getting paid, which is the big factor here. So right now, he's not getting paid due to the suspension. Of course, if that can be changed, if he was on long-term injury reserve, he would be getting paid instead. So obviously, it impacts the Jets' salary cap situation as well, and kind of handcuffs them from making other moves until this is settled. So we'll have to wait and see how this all shakes out and how it's going to impact the Jets. But could you possibly see Dustin Byfuglien, once he's healthy, being traded? Do you think this is going to ruin the relationship between a player and a team and cause him to move on once he's ready to play again? Now, as I mentioned as well, could we possibly see a big trade at some point, whether it be during the season or next offseason, between the Calgary Flames and the Philadelphia Flyers? Now, the other day we reported on the fact that there's been a lot of reports out there that the Flames would consider trading one of their top forwards in Johnny Gaudreau. Now, of course, Gaudreau is having a pretty decent season, but not quite up to his own standards in the past that he's set here. He certainly has had some struggles, and obviously the Flames as a team, as a fan base, as an organization are all pretty frustrated right now with their lack of progress and build off last year's tremendous regular season. Unfortunately, they get bounced early in the playoffs, but still they were hoping to build off that regular season success and take it a step further this year. And on paper, this team looks like they certainly had the ability to do so, and there's been lots of reports that the Flames are looking to shake things up. Now, of course, the reports on Johnny Gaudreau were kind of cooled a little bit by NHL insider Elliotte Friedman, who's gone on record to say that he would be extremely shocked and surprised if the Flames traded Gaudreau sometime during this season. But there's another report from the Philadelphia Inquirer, Sam Carchidi, not necessarily saying he has sources that the deal's being discussed, just a possible deal he felt could help both teams between the Flames and the Flyers. And I just want to get your thoughts to see what you would think on this potential trade if it actually did come to be. Now, of course, as we know, Johnny Gaudreau is a U.S.-born player with ties to the Jersey, Philadelphia area, so going back to play for the Devils or the Flyers would basically be like going home for him. So ultimately, that might be something he would be interested in longer term. So here's the deal that he presented in his article, saying Johnny Gaudreau going to the Flyers, and that the Flyers would have to include either Jacob Voracek or James Van Riemsdyk going back the other way, along with some other pieces. Now, of course, the Flyers have a lot of younger players right now that are either on the roster getting limited opportunity or in the American Hockey League. They have a very intriguing group of forward prospects, in my opinion. Of course, it could also include some draft picks or something along those lines to sweeten the deal as well. So I'm not really sure how the Flames would feel about that. I think Gaudreau is a little bit younger and more dynamic than either of those other players. Very different player than either of them. Voracek in his day has certainly been a great player, but I do think he's kind of at a stage in his career where he's starting to decline. I'm not really sure that the Flames would be overly interested in that. I think personally that if they're going to trade Gaudreau to the Flyers, they would probably want something, maybe a little bit younger, maybe like a Travis Konechny, or maybe even one of their top young forward wingers like a Joel Farabee or a Morgan Frost or something to that effect, which the Flyers may not want to do, but at the same time, it's hard to say. Both teams are at a situation where they've had some success, but the Flyers are make the playoffs, miss the playoffs, make the playoffs, miss the playoffs, etc. So I guess we will remain to be seen if this deal could take place or not, but it's just some food for thought, and there's no sources indicating these teams are talking. I just wanted to present the information from the article to you as a fan base here, as hockey fans, to see what you think of the trade. If the Flames do go down the road of trading Johnny Gaudreau, are the Flyers a good landing spot? And would that type of package deal satisfy the Flames to make the trade? As I mentioned as well, I just want to follow up a little bit more on the Mike Babcock firing from the Toronto Maple Leafs yesterday. They kind of shook the NHL world. Certainly big news out of Toronto, and it's been something that's been discussed really for the past few weeks, even back to last offseason. At the end of the year, there was some talk. Could the Leafs go in a new direction? If the Leafs started slow, could they go in a new direction? And then as the slow start kind of has been festering here, there's been more and more talk the last couple of weeks. But many NHL insiders did not see this coming and thought it would be something that would happen later into the season or next summer if the Leafs decided to go down this road. But after listening to General Manager Kyle Dubas and Brendan Shanahan speak to the media and answer some questions, it certainly becomes clear, I think more than ever before, that we already didn't know, because of shock here, that there was clearly some philosophical differences between Mike Babcock and Kyle Dubas and how he's basically engineered this team. Babcock was not putting the players to use and the way that they were expected to be, and how they're going to be most successful. So Kyle Dubas had an interesting quote, I thought, from this media interview. So Dubas has asked the Leafs players to have the ability to be uncomfortable through the stylistic change so the team can play exactly how it was designed. So Kyle Dubas also referenced the fact that, obviously at times there's bound to be some philosophical differences or some difference of opinions between the coach and GM, but I think it was pretty clear over really quite some time that Dubas and Babcock did not have the same philosophical beliefs and that they had totally different ideas on how this team should be operated. Babcock criticized openly many of the acquisitions he'd made, like last year when he acquired Jake Muzzin. He didn't seem excited at all about the fact that he got a proven, winner who's had Stanley Cup success and somebody who has been known as a pretty decent defender. He just criticized the fact that it was a left shot instead of a right shot and said he would make it work. I mean, look at Jason Spezza, signs as a veteran, short-term deal in the offseason, met with Babcock to discuss what kind of role he would have, and then they get into the season, it's completely different. Just Tyson Barrie not getting deployed properly. Clearly, Babcock was kind of stubborn in his ways, as we can all agree on, and would not adapt to how this team was designed to get the most out of it, and clearly it was time for a change. How many of the Leafs players were kind of frustrated as well, and I think ready for a change. So it will be interesting to see how Sheldon Keefe does as the head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's going to be thrown into his first game tonight against the Arizona Coyotes without having any time to run a practice or anything. And clearly, based on Dubas' comments, they're going to be making some changes here on how this team is run and how the style of play, the systems, everything's going to be given an overhaul here. And they clearly believe in Sheldon Keefe's ability to do that. If you ask me, a couple of players that are probably going to benefit the most from this coaching change would probably be Austin Matthews and Tyson Barrie. I mean, like we talked about Matthews a lot here over the last couple of years, and critical moments, don't you want your top goal scorer on the ice? And there's been numerous times when Babcock would go to his fourth line either right after a goal or in final minutes of play instead of having Matthews and his wingers on the ice to try to get a big goal for the team. His numbers, like his minutes were down. This doesn't make sense. We've seen an increase here in many of the NHL's top forwards playing more and more minutes, bigger roles for their team, and that's something that the Leafs have not really done under Babcock, which I suspect we will see some changes here under Sheldon Keefe. I mean, Austin Matthews has already been incredibly productive as it is. If he only gets more and more ice time, gets to play in more critical moments, we're going to see that even grow even further. And for a player like Tyson Barrie, he has to be deployed properly. If you take a look at what and how he's had success over his career, clearly, he wasn't being used in that manner, and if they can use him properly, I do think he can get things back on track and be the offensive production player that they expected him to be when he was acquired. So I guess we'll see. I'd be very interested to see the changes that Keefe makes and how he runs this lineup. Clearly, they're still dealing with some injuries. It's going to be a little while before he gets a full arsenal under his belt here to be able to change his lines and adjust things the way he sees fit on a longer-term basis. But the new era in Toronto, Sheldon Keefe and Kyle Dubas, which has really, I think, been the plan all along. It was just a matter of when, not if it was going to happen. So let me know which Maple Leaf players you think will most benefit from this coaching change now that Mike Babcock is no longer running the show. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.